Yo, so I didn't write much. Took a few notes to catch the important points. And actually, I think I'll roll off of something I remember saying in the last video. Something along the lines, and this will actually transition well with this, something along the lines of that footprint that's up on that rock. And it was something about when you realize that the story of that footprint and immortals is as real as the story is money, things get weird. That's a good place to start. Now, I think the title of this is going to be the importance of keeping it real, and I didn't have this in mind when I shot that bit at the beginning with the room being a mess. But a lot of stuff on social media isn't exactly real, right? Like it's a narrative, it's a story. People present the best sides of themselves. They usually don't present the messy room or whatever. And that's always been important, like an aspect of having some reality in these videos. But that's a little bit different than what I wanted to focus on here. I'll just kind of go in order of what brought me to be really serious about keeping it real. Now, this also goes back to another video. When I watched, I think the name of that film is The Game Changers, about the plant-based diet and me being pumped about it. And I'm still pretty pumped about it, but I eat like Magda Cook's meat all the time and whatever. Like I don't make extreme changes like that. But shortly afterwards, there was a guy that was on the Joe Rogan podcast, a friend sent it, who debunked everything about the Game Changers. I don't know, I didn't watch the podcast. Now, what bothered me about that is, you got this stylishly done video, you got this other guy debunking the video, and so you got these two extremes, and it's like there's these two alternate realities, but there's a real message either all the way over here, or somewhere in between. And that just bugged me. I'm like, oh man, this is like, what bugged me is I gotta go and either watch Joe Rogan or read or whatever, and then the thing about the Joe Rogan guy, he's a guy who's in acupuncture. That's another topic, and he's like a questionable source. So you have all these questionable sources. That's something that bothered me. And then I already mentioned, I didn't really mention Kanye from the other video, but Kanye and the church stuff, we'll come back to that. This is the thing that really got me. Maybe I should have led with this, but this is the thing that really got me. I'm on Facebook scrolling through my feed, and an ad comes up, and it leads with the discovery of this 290 million year old footprint, and science doesn't know where it came from and whatever. And I was like, 290 million years old. Now, I'm no paleontologist or whatever, but I do know the timeline of the development of humans somewhat, and 290 million year old, it was ridiculous to me. I look it up and it's ridiculous to all of science. But what bugged me is it was an advertisement for this Gaia Online, which says they have consciousness expanding videos, and they feed into this people's desire. They got yoga videos and all that, this desire of mystery and aliens and whatever, but that was just pure garbage. And I'm like, wow, that was just garbage. And then most of their videos look garbage. But who's the guy? I saw some famous guy in one of their videos, and I'm like, dude, it is not okay to endorse this kind of stuff. And the reason being, something that came to mind about that, the kind of people, the audience for those videos, into yoga and whatever, they're the same people who would be pro, they believe in climate change, right? Like they want to make the planet better. You know, Gaia, I think that means Earth goddess or something. But they want to do this not because of science, though, right? Like if they were into science, that footprint would have been like, oh, that's bullshit. So they're not into science, but they're into the right thing for the wrong reason, protecting the Earth. But then I'm sure they would want to convince people who don't believe in climate change to believe in climate change, and they would want to present science to them, but at the same time they're science deniers. So it's like, you don't believe in science. Like when science tells you, no, this 298 million year old footprint is bullshit, or this about aliens is bullshit, whatever, like you want to buy that. But then all of a sudden when science fits your narrative, reality fits your narrative, then you want to like push that on other people. But it's like, hey, you're not being real over here, but then like you want to be real over, like it's just bad news. So the that's what set me off, was this 290 million year old footprint. And then it just got me thinking about all the things that people allow to, you know, that aren't real, that drive them. Like, dude, just like speaking of Kanye, Jesus is King and all that, like this all triggered me to the point where like I like it's been in my mind, but like, dude, I'm just atheist now. Like I just like I think I have been for a long time, but I just like oh, whatever, okay, people having their fairy tale, whatever. But dude, it's not okay. Now I'm not gonna be running around trying to convince anybody that their belief in God is wrong or whatever, because, you know, people will kind of rightly argue that people have a positive experience with church and all that kind of stuff. And while I'm saying I'm atheist, I still do believe in higher orders of consciousness, but I wouldn't, like, you know, call them a god or anything. People think of God and they think of like humans walking around, where I'm talking about just kind of, you know, you have consciousness, I have consciousness, all these different consciousnesses dancing together produces a kind of intelligence. And then there might be other weird productions of another video. But my point is like, I can't endorse or be okay with the different God stories. And here, this is a good place to come to this point with God stories or whatever. Now, like I started my 108 All series about meditation, but then that got me into looking into Buddhism and everything. And this also fits into reality and stories. There's a story in Buddhism and Zen Buddhism, or, you know, specifically Zen Buddhism, Chinese. Chan, still got a cough. There's a story about the Buddha giving a sermon, and he didn't say anything. He just raised a flower. Maybe you've heard this story. He raised a flower, and somebody in the audience was enlightened. I forget the guy's name. And the Buddha's like, "Oh, you got the doctrine without words or something, right?" And like, oh, it's a cool story. This guy got enlightened from lifting a flower. And then supposedly that guy passed on this enlightenment all the way to Bodhidharma. Like, if you don't know who he is, he's the Indian guy who brought Chan, who brought that form of Buddhism, Chan Buddhism, to China. And then he had some students. You know, well, he had a student who had a student, so on and so forth. And then that, you know, he was in China maybe 600, 700, 500, you know, AD era. And then, you know, he passes it on. It gets passed on, all the way right up to, you know, they call it Dharma transmission, all the way up to some guy in the U.S. And what got me to question this story is there's like a bunch of drama with Zen in the U.S. where a number of the Japanese dudes who came over were like sexual predators, not for like kids, but taking advantage of adults. And then there's this one white dude who got the transmission from this Japanese dude. And this Japanese dude seemed like he was kind of okay, but then this dude was a guy who was banging all his students and whatever. But a part of what that upset everybody is that the Japanese guy gave that guy the Dharma transmission. The only guy who got it in the West is this guy, and that's all a big deal and everything. But it's all connected to, going back to that flower story, that was just made up. That was made up in like 1200 AD. Like there's no records of it in India or whatever. It was just something totally made up to make Zen have more like its special authority because it's this special transmission. So, it's another situation where you have all these are adults, functioning adults in the United States, drinking this Zen Kool-Aid based off of a made-up story. That's the foundation for this Dharma transmission, and that messed me up. I'm like, man, that's weird. That's weird, but it's, just like stories with Jesus resurrecting. That shit didn't happen. That did not happen. There was no time in history when humans possessed magic that allowed people to walk on water and whatever, and then that magic disappeared because of technology. No, technology is the magic. Moses did not separate the ocean. None of stuff happened. It just did not happen. There's no evidence for that having happened, and nothing in my experience now or that I see, I'll add the final. This isn't the final component. I'm not sure what the timeline of all this is, but this kind of messed me up too. I can't see my time. How long, man? 12 minutes. There's a little, like the thing that's holding the phone covers up the. So one more thing and these are all kind of separate, interrelated things. The key thing, the thing that set me off was that 290-year-old footprint ad that I saw on Facebook. I was like, the fuck? I mean, because, you got Trump with his fake news, and you got what's going on now. I mean, it's information warfare right now, like with Russian propaganda, and you could, whether you're left-leaning or right-leaning, there are basically websites that do not give you the full truth, or they think they're giving you the truth, and they've been compromised by like a Russian or some other, agent. And I guess this rolls into, it won't seem like it connects to this well, but this connects well to where the Russians are, not to make them the boogeyman and they're magically pulling the strings everywhere, like, no, but they are, doing what they're trying to do. But their goal is, it's like nation state power, right? Like destabilizing the Western bloc or whatever, Ukraine, or destabilizing the U.S., or, making Trump an asset. He seems like a Russian asset, whether he's compliant or not, like whether he's, going along with it on purpose, or they're just under control of him. And then you have other news organizations. They're doing it for different reasons, whether they're being empowered to pass through policy, or also nation state power, getting their people elected, whatever. And maybe this is a good way to end it. So, all this, if you have Netflix, there's an episode. This one hit me well, like any of these, depending on what you were into. I watched the one it's about the toys that made us. and there's an episode on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and and it's really good. It's informative. It's entertaining. If you don't know the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story, a basic background is two guys made this thing. They wanted to live off of making comic books. They made this kind of underground comic book. It did well. I knew about that, and I knew that Turtles got big. Everybody knows that. But there was a guy who saw their intellectual property and was like, I think I can sell this. So he went around trying to sell it, and he found a Hong Kong-based toy manufacturer who was like, yeah, we'll try to do this. We'll do this. And the thing that messed me up is, you had these guys. The Turtle story is interesting, and I'll mention Transformers a little bit after that. The Turtle story is interesting because you had some guys who were really into the art at the genesis of it, and they're into the art, and they maintained like some control of art, what would happen with the cartoon and the toys, so they maintained some control of the art. But like the cartoon was specifically engineered and designed to sell toys, right? Like that's why the cartoon was, that's 100% why it was produced, to sell toys. And so there's this manufactured desire, this manufactured demand, that the demand is manufactured, so this manufacturer can sell these toys, right? So that whole thing is made up, and then then they like start cranking out new enemies, new toys, just new guys, bad guys they make up, and they do this, and then they just keep doing it over and over again, right? Like you get Turtles, you get a Turtles, cartoon reboot, and then there was that like animated 3D computer reboot. You got the movie reboot. I think it was Viacom, maybe the guys who own Nickelodeon eventually bought it from one of the dudes left, he got bought out, and then he bought it from this guy for $60 million, and then they do new cartoon reboots and the movies, and it's all like this manufactured desire to sell things. And seeing that, because I was into Ninja Turtles growing up, the timing was right for me. Like I probably saw the cartoon first and then found out about the old school comic, which was badass. But just seeing how that whole machine, just that one Turtles machine, was just created. And you gotta remember, I'm like thinking about Zen stuff and whatever too, and a big thing with Zen and Buddhism distilled without gods and the Buddha and stuff is understanding the nature of suffering and how desire plays into that, and seeing this story with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and how it, I remember really wanting those toys. My mom probably remembers me wanting those toys. I remember I don't know if I ever got the turtle van, and I had a lot of the turtles. I remember I had a little boat thing, but that whole thing was just constructed to fuck with my mind as a kid to get me to want to buy this stuff. And there's this, which requires probably a separate video, this interesting thing between art and consumerism, right? Like that, there's a conversation to be had there. Like I'm not saying all art is bad and wanting to buy things is bad, but that whole manufactured experience just for pushing profit. If you just look at that one turtle thing, so many elements of your and my life are essentially just like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for kids, but then it's done to adults. Whether you look at it like with religion, whether you look at it with how the news is, manipulating and pulling strings, where they're not trying to sell you turtle toys, but they're trying to buy your vote, right? They're trying to sell you on ideas, and or going back to the game changers, trying to either they believe in actually veganism or plant-based diet is healthy for you, or they have some alternative agenda. Same for the guy who countered that video. Same, dude. I'll have to make a whole Kanye video that isn't me just like but like dude, Kanye is his own. It's interesting though because he's he's very artistic, very art driven. Now he's driven by this spiritual God narrative, which I think has been a part of him for a long time. But all these different aspects of people's lives are just manufactured, just like manufactured desire, just like the turtles. The desire isn't a natural thing, but there's all these different variations of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And going back to the importance of reality and keeping it real, if you don't, if you allow for these stories to infiltrate your mind and your perception, it just warps like everything. Everybody is walking around thinking about what they lack or what they want, whether it's Death Stranding or dude, I went hard on on Black Friday. Magda bought a bunch of games and then I bought my own games. Do a different video about that. But these, all these different things, people are getting pulled in all these different directions with this, manufactured Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like desire. And man, I was just about to end with something and I forgot what that something is. I remember what the something is. I will end here. Maybe I forgot to write this down, but this is all like kind of connected to me and my bipolar thing. And I guess now this is kind of, I mean, if you're here watching this, you're clearly down for the ride. But so I guess it was just earlier this year where I made a conscious decision to not be crazy. This wasn't so much not be bipolar, like that there may or may, I don't know how much control I have over that by just rewiring my mind with new thought protocols. I think there's quite a bit of control there, but I decided not to be crazy. And there's like something about like past manic episodes or the manic episode last year, but last year was interesting because I was being more deliberately crazy. Like I there was a part of me that was like, yeah, dude, you're gonna drink up all the crazy and just swim in it. But the thing about it, last year, not including last year where I was like, other ones though, maybe a lot of times I'm experimenting on myself, but when you have these like false, these not real, maybe conspiracy driven narratives inside, and then like manic energy comes where you're not thinking clearly, and then it latches on to poor ideas. I'm trying to think of some of past ones, but I mean, what comes to mind, like I said, conspiracy theory, things with like the Illuminati. That's a good one. The Illuminati one is good because you're, if you're smart and capable, you'll start seeing, if you're into the Illuminati, it doesn't necessarily mean you're smart, but when you're smart and you start thinking about the Illuminati, you will start seeing patterns, number patterns, symbol patterns, that, dude, you'll just weave, you'll just see all these connections and like wondering like, here's like something crazy, right? Like here's a crazy thought I remember having. It's not related to anything here, but kind of the idea that a symbol is bi-directional, right? Like when I see it, it sees me somehow. And not that necessarily the artist that created the symbol sees me, but there's this like otherworldly connection stuff that happens as a, I don't know, as an idea, which I was going to say I think is true, but not true in my crazy way, true in a different way. But not even having a little bit of real, like, well, here's one, like, this happened to me, and this happens to a lot of bipolar people, or people who have different mental things, where you get like messianic, is that right, feeling, where you think you're Jesus, or you think you're some spiritual being or whatever, and that is from, you know, the different false narrative stories that you have inside. So yeah, I think I'll just stop there, dude. It's really, 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 really important to maintain a strong foundation in reality. I'm not telling you to do this, you know, you do you. But for me, like, I'm realizing that that's really important. And, you know, this is also connected to my NaNoWriMo thing, the writing month, which I only got, it was supposed to be 50,000 words. I got sick, Death Stranding, I did like 20,000. But the majority of my writing was focused on the topic of kind of enlightenment and you know, enlightenment and reducing general suffering for, you know, on an individual level. Like, that's what I would want to communicate through the book with whatever stories I might share, things I say. Like, I don't want to write for entertainment. Like, there's so much like good entertainment out there. I mean, you know, video games, movies, books, so many prolific fiction writers, so much stuff. I'm not saying I couldn't be one of those, but I have no desire to be one. Like, there's just so much good stuff out there. I do want to draw and stuff at some point, but when it comes to writing books, even creating this kind of content, now, you know, my focus is shifting, I guess, and it just came out from writing that book. Like, I really want to help people reduce their suffering. And I think writing that 290 million year old footprint, all that, I realized for me, my path to doing that is one that's, you know, the foundation of it is in reality and keeping it real, you know. So no hocus pocus, no stories about big feet or gods or whatever. Yeah, that's not for me. I think gods and everything have a place for organizing large groups of monkeys. All right, I'm done. Speaking of monkeys, anybody see that Assassin's Creed game that's coming out? The guy who made Assassin's Creed about, I guess you're not technically a monkey or an ape evolving. Alright, I'm ended there. So, yeah, man, gotta keep it real, man. Gots to keep it real. So, yeah, it looks like I've become an atheist and a skeptic. But I've always been skeptical of atheists and skeptics. But, like, people, 290 million year old. Okay, I'm done. Alright. Later, guys. Peace.